Welcome to Picks of the Professor, the sports betting show brought to you by a real statistics professor. This is college football 2025 week 0. Cousin Jared, we are back to talk real games. You and me and Jake discussed some season bets. Folks, if you haven't watched that, make sure to check that out. That link's out there. I don't know. I should probably put it in the show description or something. We had a lot of fun with that. But now it's time to get to it. 4 games this week. I know you're excited.
I'm very excited. And when you look at, historically the type of games that we've had the first weekend of college football, this is like not a bad slate of games, honestly. So you can't ask for anything more, in my opinion. Just that little teaser that you get before the season starts. And then, of course, we've got a Hawaii game. They are the reason really for this week, since they get the extra game because of all the travel. Most seasons they play 13 games. And so, just to be able to cap it off the first weekend of the season with a game in Hawaii is just chef's kiss. It's perfect and a great appetizer for what we're going to have for 5 straight days. Yeah. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday of the following week, Labor Day weekend. So gonna be great. Excited to be back for this season.
It'll be a lot of fun. You're right. It'll be a better weekend than most. I know that there's been times that we've done this week 0 show and it's been only 2 FBS games, and we've had to talk about some of the other ones, and there's some lines out there, but it was a whole lot shorter. It's actually 4 decent games. Could be, at least might be a blowout or two, like anything. But we're also going to do some preseason ratings talk at the end. We're going to drop some model nuggets, so it should be some fun discussion there. We'll have some hot takes. We'll have a little bit of a segment we like to call "Please be kind when you tell us how wrong we are," because, as we like to say here, right, all models are wrong, some models are useful, and we're going to have some takes about teams and quarterbacks that the model's wrong at all of it. The whole point is that we're just trying to be close enough to be useful, and that's where we generally landed with Sideline. Because, Andrea, this is where I would, if I was more prepared, give us the historical rundown of all the money we make every year betting college football. As many people know, it's been a long journey back to this point for me personally, so we don't have any of those graphics or anything like that prepared, but we usually do pretty well here with college football, and so like you said, it's good to be back. Anything else I should remind the people of before we get started?
Yeah, just general reminders. The only thing that, and I try to keep this in mind because it's sometimes a little uncomfortable to do, but there is a lot of wins to be had early in the season when you have models like this that can identify things that maybe the public or, maybe the people setting the lines haven't quite fully incorporated yet. And so it is sometimes kind of a leap of faith with these things, but we know it's this way in every sport. As the season goes on, the edges just get smaller and smaller. So, kind of got to strike while the iron's hot. The first few weeks of the season are definitely the time to kind of take advantage of those big edges that might be out there.
Yeah, it's a good point that the model will get much better as the season goes along, but the problem is everyone else's models in Vegas and everything else will get better too. And so we're all playing with the same information for the most part. That's one of the benefits of being here with us. The model I've built, I called it Sideline. It is a player-based model because, Jared, you were looking through some of the key injuries earlier, making sure that we had that straightened out. We've done a lot of quarterback depth chart stuff where that really matters. We'll discuss some of that where relevant. And so this player-based model is really helpful for us in that regard, but it is very questionable right now. There's a lot, and we'll talk about some of the big variances, the big question marks that make it where, hey, we might be off by a lot here, but the problem is everybody might be off by a lot. And that's, like you said, where there are some big edges to take advantage of. If we can identify the right ones, that's what we're going to try to do here as we go through these games. And so some reminders here, not a lot of injuries yet, but depth charts and whatnot do play in. We'll discuss as needed. If you hear us talking about grades, the way we work things here is the average grade is 100. Higher implies more points. So offenses want to be higher, defenses want to be lower. Every player gets a grade as well. We were discussing some of that over on Discord, which is, of course, your reminder that you can get all the fun chatting that we do over on Discord. You can get model information, all sorts of detailed notes, and much more if you support us on Patreon. That link also in the description. Show not brought to you by Diet Dr. Pepper or the musical Back to the Future. Great movie, mediocre musical. I like musicals. I loved Hamilton and I loved Six, but Back to the Future musical, it was okay.
So I'll have my first hot take here. Back to the Future 3, severely underrated movie.
Okay. Okay.
especially for a certain demographic. And I'm thinking, I was younger when those movies came out. The Western theme just really got me. It got me excited about it. The DeLorean on the train tracks, I feel like it just had something for everybody. So I would probably rank that ahead of Back to the Future 2, which might be the hot take part there. But anyway,
Well,
I like
'cause
Back to the Future 3.
you weren't alive for 1 and 2, and I'm not sure if you were alive when 3 came out. Well,
I was definitely alive when 3 came out. Touche, maybe not on 1.
Okay.
But definitely alive when 3 came out.
There we go. All right. Well, we'll start off. We're going to go back to segments like we did before. Now, this week, each segment only has one game because that's how it goes. So the first one is the games of the week. Well, this week, the games of the week is the game of the week, the one that everyone, of course, will be watching over across the pond. Iowa State will take on Kansas State. Ironically enough, one of my friends that I went to grad school with and his family just moved over to Ireland. So I got to follow up and see if he's going to this game or not. Not in Dublin, of course, but the game will be in Dublin, and it should be a good one. The model's got this one, unfortunately for us, pegged right where the market does. We're going to have a pick, an A-grade pick on the 3 other games. This first one, we don't. It's double C grade. The model's got it right at Kansas State -3, 3 to 4 here, right where the market is. The total's projecting 6. Right now, I'm seeing it on 51. So, I mean, you're talking about no edge whatsoever. A very well-priced game according to the model. But Cousin Jared, everyone wants to bet this game. I want to bet this game. And without any guidance from the model, the question is, what's our best angle to attack this one, knowing that we don't know a lot about anything at this point? So where's your head at?
Yeah. So I know we've talked over the years on this show about how sometimes in college football, especially more than the NFL, a field goal probably isn't as important as you think it is, just because there is a wider range of outcomes in college football games, especially as opposed to the NFL. And I'm not saying, 3 points is not valuable. It is still a very valuable number. I just think that it's a little less valuable in college football. But if there are any 2 teams that are going to find a way to play a 3-point game, it is going to be these 2. And specifically Iowa State, who I think you can almost go back through the entire time that Matt Campbell's been there, where they rarely ever don't play close games. They had the one season where they lost like 7 one-score games or something like that. They also, really the only time I can remember Iowa State just getting railroaded, I think was the year that TCU went to the national championship game and they just throttled Iowa State in Fort Worth one night. Other than that, Iowa State loves to play close games. Kansas State, a team that is very based, likes to keep the clock running. They're not going to be throwing deep bombs all the time. They're going to be, string together some first downs. If I were forced, I would either take the 3 points with Iowa State in this game, knowing that they have the ability to keep it close, or even take, I've seen Iowa State on the money line plus 140. Just throw it out there at plus odds. You're backing a good team. Kansas State may be a better team. Iowa State still a good team, and just take those plus odds there. But a game in a different country, first week of the season, I just can't bring myself to lay 3 points or lay some money on the Kansas State money line.
In the last 8 seasons, these teams have played, of course, every year. Twice, Kansas State has won by 1 point, which I find fascinating. 5 times Iowa State's won outright. And so, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Those are a lot of different teams and whatnot, but a lot of the same trends have continued with these teams, kind of as you mentioned, for the most part, that it's been closer games, typically more lower scoring. There were a couple of higher ones in there, but for the most part, there's a reason this total's right around 50 and not, 60. The one of those snow games, I think, was a couple years ago, and that was just everybody just scoring touchdowns. Fun fact on this one, it is the only never interrupted rivalry in college football, except that is going to end because the Big 12 has not decided to make it one of the protected rivalries. And so they're going to play again next year. And then in 2027, they are not scheduled to play, which I cannot believe. Farmageddon is, I feel like an iconic game, one that we always look forward to at the end of the season. The weather sometimes gets wild in those places. And now, of course, we're leading off with it here. I don't really know why in Ireland. I'm excited for the game. I think it'll be a good one, kind of as you mentioned. Kansas State, probably the better team. Model's got them like 30, Ghent and Iowa State 43rd. Model's not overly high on either one of these teams, maybe, but at least relative to the market, thinks it's pretty spot on. But Cousin Jared, I think that makes a lot of sense there. Iowa State, looking points, looking money line. We're going to have multiple segments. One of them we're going to call Walk, Don't Run. as in, hey, this is what we're interested in, but we're not loving the number. That's kind of where I'm sitting at with this one in a walk, don't run.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
rushing to do anything with this because of where the number sits. If this thing gets out to 3.5, that's a little bit more interesting because of the value.
Definitely
of that
4. I would say definitely 4. I like 4 a lot. 3.5, I feel like I'd still be on the edge.
Still be on the edge there. And that's what's interesting too. And people sometimes struggle with this, but I've built some math around the probability of a team covering. And if a team is favored by more than 3 points, it's 3 point something. Sometimes there's not value laying 3 because that 3 just sucks up so much probability that it just throws the math there and gets a little bit weird. And that's just the way, because we don't have scoring point by point like we would in basically in other sports. But even if it goes to 2.5, you're still looking at those plus odds. If you're looking at it, who knows what's going to happen here early on. So could be some value there with the Cyclones. The weakest value though, even though we're all going to bet it, but to the night games we go, where we do have things that we're more excited about. We're going to call this run, don't walk. A phrase many of you probably have heard it in teasing a segment. We're going to flip that around so that in weeks to come, we'll have both the, hey, let's get this number now, and we'll have the, maybe not dying to get this number right away, but we do like the play, even if the number might change. Fresno State and Kansas, 6:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Both the flagship universities of the state of Kansas playing here in week 0. Fresno State will have E.J. Warner at quarterback, son of former NFL great Kurt Warner, former Temple quarterback. I don't know if he went somewhere.
Former, I thought also Rice. Yes. Rice quarterback.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Now at Fresno
Some of these
State.
guys move around, and it's hard to keep up with. Not Fresno State. Jalen Daniels will be back for his what seems like 1,000th year at Kansas.
Yes,
if he could stay healthy, of course, one of the better quarterbacks in college football. A little bit of a down year last year. I'm not overly high on him based off of, just hasn't been able to quite keep it together, keep it on the field. We've got this one pretty spot on with a number, not a lot of value, kind of in that dead man's land of we've got Kansas by 11, maybe 12. They're favored by 13.5. Really not much value either way, but we like the over. A grade play here for us. Our first one of the season. Sideline's got this at 56.5. So we've got a full, almost touchdown of value here. Cousin Jared, I'm not implying that the model's off by a full touchdown, but what makes you think that the model might be onto something here, saying this total is priced a little bit too low and we want to go ahead and lock in this over because the market's just missing on how many points we think we'll have?
You mentioned something very important there. Jalen Daniels, if he can stay healthy, that should be his full name because you never know. But the good news is, as of right now, as of this recording and going into this first game, Jalen Daniels will be healthy. And so that is something that you can rely on, and a reason why I like this over here. I think the reason that this total is so low is because the new head coach from Fresno State was the linebackers coach from USC last season, I believe. And you may say, well, that makes me want to bet the over for sure if he coached defense at USC. But the thing is, prior to that, he was, I believe, either the head coach or some very high-level assistant at North Dakota State. And so the idea is that Fresno State will be wanting to implement that type of offense, more of a run-focused offense, possess the ball, keep the other team's offense off the field. I think that's why this total is where it's at. But with that being said, again, with the caveat of Jalen Daniels is healthy because it's the first game of the season, I don't think Fresno State is going to be able to slow down Kansas, especially early in this one. I think that Kansas could score lots of points before halftime. I am running to get over 49.5 because I could easily see this game jumping up to 51, which is the first key number above 49.5. Really, I would say 50.5. We want that win on. I could easily see this jumping up to 50.5 or 51. I think that's much more likely than this dropping down to 48, which is, kind of the next number that would really matter if we were trying to wait for a better numbers. For me, this is, we don't always try to project what way this number is going to go. I would just be surprised if it went down to 48 unless some weather related came up. Let's go over 49.5. We're south of all those key numbers there in the 50s, 51, 52, 55, 8. So yeah, just seems like a good value play. And like I said, I don't think Fresno State's going to be able to slow down Jalen Daniels.
Jalen Daniels ranked number 53 for the quarterbacks, according to Sideline. If you had told me a couple of years ago he'd still be around, starting the season healthy, I would have been shocked at 53. I would have guessed 20s, 30s. I mean, I feel like that rating is a little bit in part due to lack of ability to stay on the field and then some inconsistent play, partially because some of the injuries. But obviously, that guy's got a huge ceiling. And we've seen that Kansas offense go crazy. I think we might have mentioned on the preseason show, Kansas is on their like 19th offensive coordinator in the last 4 years, it seems like. There's obviously a little bit of that, but they keep bringing in good guys. They've got the weapons on offense. And so there's a lot of reasons that are like the over. We talk a lot about here about key numbers on here. And so, because you did a good job of outlining that right there. And there is some 50 and a halves out there still at even money, maybe some slight plus odds. If this does tick up and that starts getting to be the number, grab it before it gets to 51, because like we said, we want to go ahead and get that win on 51, as while your brain might want to say 52 sounds like the key number because that's 7 times 7 plus 3. There actually tends to be more field goals than one on an average college football game. And so because of that, 51 is more of your key number. We're going to talk about weather a lot with the next game. I was trying to pull up here, if I could, the weather for this one just to kind of confirm. For us, it looks like, low 80s, 5 to 10 mile an hour wind looks like perfectly fine, just normal good conditions. So always want to check that out, because not the next game, but the last game we talked about, the weather will be a huge thing to mention. So we're going to go over 49 and a half. There is the official 8 grade play. Again, numbers moving around a little bit. 49 and a half, 50, 50 and a half. If it lands on 50, we just laugh. That's not a common outcome. We're turning to one of our favorite segments, Cousin Jared. You don't got to watch them to make the monies. And that's one of the key things we want to talk about here. Sometimes there's some ugly college football games that aren't sexy to talk about, but there's value to be had. Obviously, only one game per segment here. CMU Houston State and Western Kentucky falls into that boat this time, 7 p.m. Eastern. The main thing here is this isn't maybe setting up to be a terrible game. There are some interesting things to watch about it. If you're a college football junkie like us, the problem is CMU Houston State ranked 113th right now, according to Sideline. Expecting a little bit of a rebuild here with new coach Phil Longo. We talked about this on the season bets episode. Them playing a couple games here right off the bat. 2 games. They'll play next Friday. They'll play 2 games before a bunch of teams even play 1. And so I'm going to figure that out quickly. Western Kentucky, because you have a season-long playoff. So something happening here of interest for you, but it won't be quite as interesting maybe as the other 2 games happening at this time. The model might lean towards taking the 10.5 with Sam Houston. This was at 9.5 for a long time. It got bet across 10. The model might lean to grab that 10, but is it running to do that? Because, Jared, I think we're kind of in the same boat. We want to see more from the Sam Houston team. I talked to the Discord about this. I'm really excited about their offense as it progresses through the season. Their defense has some question marks. Western Kentucky might blow the doors off of them. It wouldn't really shock me here, but we've got an A grade play on the under 61 and a half. That's a very big number. There's a lot of reasons to think this goes under if you look at the way Sam Houston's played in the past. I'm not sure that's going to be their setup this year, but also we're in week 0. So I'm not expecting their offense to be rocking and rolling now. And if they do get thumped, they're probably going to get thumped by scoring a grand total of 10 points. And then we just need Western Kentucky to not score 51. Hey, grade play on the under 61.5. Model says 47. So again, not to imply that the market's off by 2 touchdowns, but the idea being, hey, we really just do not think that it's going to be that high scoring, that maybe Sam Houston later in the year gets there, but it seems a little bit early to think about that now. What's your take?
You mentioned that, the last game was a run, don't walk. This one could have also been a walk, don't run, because if this did get up to 62 for some reason, 62 is also a key number. So if you wanted to wait till closer to kickoff and hope to get a 62 on this, I would not blame you. I completely agree with you that I think the reason this total is up where it's at is because of the Phil Longo effect with Sam Houston State. He kind of had a reputation for not only being a good offensive coordinator, but also kind of being rough on his own defense. His offense playing so fast, it left, his team's defense out on the field a lot and kind of wore them down over time. I think that's why you're seeing this. The other thing I would say is that Western Kentucky brought in Maverick McAvor.
Yeah.
As my mother-in-law would say, with a name like Maverick, he plays quarterback. Western Kentucky imported the offense from Abilene Christian last year, which that in and of itself maybe not doesn't say much, but I would say Western Kentucky has proven adept at doing this. It's what they did with Bailey Zappi a handful of years ago, bringing him in from Houston Baptist at the time, now Houston Christian, along with his offensive coordinator. So I think that's why this total is like that. You've got the Phil Longo effect. You've got Western Kentucky usually has a solid offense, has a good track record of importing offenses like this. But in honor of Lee Corso's last game next week, not so fast, my friend. What I would say with Longo is he runs a spread offense, but it's very much predicated on running the football. Sam Houston State on offense the past couple of years has really done better as Hunter Watson has thrown the ball more. Sam Houston wanted to be that team that just kind of ground and pound and ran the ball a lot, and they weren't that great at it. And so maybe Longo will get them there, but I do not think it's going to be an immediate thing that they will be able to run the ball. So I think Sam Houston's going to have to do some tinkering and some learning on offense before they really hit their stride. And on the Western Kentucky side, I mean, it's been at least 2 seasons now where it's been like, if you think Western Kentucky is going to be in a high scoring game, it's going to be low scoring. If you think that they're going to be a low scoring game, it's going to be high scoring.
Yeah.
They are going to do the opposite of whatever you want
They
to do.
want to make you uncomfortable.
Yes, they want to make you uncomfortable.
That's their game plan. Their coaches are fantastic at it. They're some of the best that I've seen it. Just say, hey, you want to do this? Fine. We aren't going to let you do it.
Yep.
And they do it great.
And Sam Houston, they may have only a 90 pace according to Sideline. I'm going to bet that increases as the season goes on with Longo. So because of that, I think Western Kentucky is actually going to be wanting to slow this game down because I think Longo is going to want to play faster. So all of that, long story to say, that's why I like the under 61.5. But again, you don't have to go run and get it. You can give it some time. If it ends up being 61, 60.5, that's fine. I would still play under there. If it gets up to 62, though, even better for us.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll take us to our last game. Again, we've got preseason ratings and rankings coming, so some good discussion about that stuff. So don't run away, folks. Stick around for that. But After Dark observed, because this is not a true After Dark, but we will have an After Dark segment where we cover the good After Dark games, the late games. We're calling this observe like a holiday. We're observing it even if it's not on the holiday because this game's in Hawaii. And so whether or not it is After Dark or not, we're calling it part of the After Dark because enjoy the Island Special that we love every time we can wrap up with an Island Special. Stanford and Andrew Luck, Captain Andrew Luck is back, folks.
Yes.
If you don't follow on Twitter, it's a great follow. With Stanford, a team that I feel like has been very up and down lately. Some young guys and some promise, and then fall flat, and then kind of, it seems every couple years it's like maybe they're figuring it out, and then they haven't, and they just now they're turning to some different ways to try to get going here. Going to start off traveling to Hawaii as part of members of the ACC, then they'll be traveling to the other coast later. Their travel is going to get wonky, but here we are.
What have we done?
What have we done? It's Pandora's box was opened, and folks, we aren't going back. I don't know where we're going, but I know wherever we're going, I just want to get there. I don't really care.
Yeah,
I'm not a get off my lawn kind of guy. I know some of you have strong feelings. I just want to get wherever we're going because right now it's kind of this uncomfortable middle. Anyway, we've got them as the one of our favorites here, the wrong team favored game. Sideline has Stanford winning this 55% of the time. Saying they should be slight favorites. We've got Stanford at plus 110 as an A grade play. Again, obviously we don't know a lot early on, but what is it, Cassandra, that you see that says, Stanford, the better team traveling out to Hawaii still should be favored in this game? The fact that they're slight underdogs, a little bit of disrespect here.
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I think Stanford, according to Sideline, I think Stanford might be a little overrated. Sideline has them number 76. I think that things are going to be bottoming out there this year is what I would say. And you, viewer, I would say, go join us over on Patreon. I've written some college football articles this year. I actually had my own rankings out there, 1 through 136. And I had Stanford, even though I am much lower on Stanford than what Sideline is, I still had Stanford number 94, which is still better than what Sideline has Hawaii. If you're curious, I had Hawaii at 104. So I even still had Stanford 10 spots higher than Hawaii. I just think this is the classic going out to the islands. Hawaii plays well at home. I think That is why this number is where it is, but it's just given too much respect.
And the model, by the
to
way, has
Hawaii.
that baked in. So that's part of
Yeah.
it. They get a different home field advantage than everybody else, and everyone gets their own home field advantage, but there's a specific for that. So it's not like the model's completely missing that.
Yeah. So I think just absolute best case scenario for Hawaii in this game is a toss up. And to your point, we're going to take plus 110 on a toss up every single week of the season. It's kind of our bread and butter around here. And this is
In all
one where
sports.
I would, yes, definitely in all sports. And I would say that we talked earlier about, do the points matter? What instances might the points matter? What instances might the points not matter? I would probably recommend in this one, don't worry about the points. Just if you're going to back Stanford on the money line, don't worry about the points in this one. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. The total in this one, set in the low 50s, is one where it's potentially going to be a little bit lower scoring, but the variance component of this is high enough that either one of these teams winning by a touchdown or two isn't crazy. Whereas we talked about that Kansas State Iowa State game, similar total, but the difference there is that those two teams tend to play a lot of grinded out close games. And Stanford might be at a lot of those, but Hawaii doesn't tend to be in a lot of those games.
No.
They tend to either just play great and handle, or they're full and flat. That home field of the island doesn't really work because the team was ready to go in there, and we've seen them get crushed at home. Or that home field really works, the team's distracted, and Hawaii goes out and wins by 14, or hangs in against a team they should lose by 14. That sort of thing. So there's a lot of variance there. So this is where those plus odds, the odds really matter. The price really matters here. Of course, we try to remind everybody of that. The total in this one's interesting. It opened up in the mid, and that's where Sideline has it. Now, there's no weather component to the college football version of Sideline, at least yet. Maybe one day it is on the higher hanging fruit to-do list. It is part of the baseball one, which is mandatory. But we're expecting some winds here in Hawaii. Right now, we're looking at 15-mile-an-hour winds. That's going to have a little bit of an effect on offenses. That's going to have a little bit of effect on kickers. And so this total has been bet down into the low 50s. And so the model would say, hey, there's a little bit of value there. Not playing the over based off of that, because we know that the drop in the number is a reflection of the weather, which the model doesn't have. I think the model opened up right around where the market did, and had the model had the weather update, it probably would be right in line, thinking low 50s. Because, Jared, sometimes these weather games get, especially out in Hawaii is a place like that. There's a few, Buffalo in the NFL is one of them, Wrigley for baseball, right? Where the wind can really wreak havoc a little bit more than usual. What are you looking for here wind wise before you might say, I'm also looking at the under, because even though this total is dropping, these conditions are going to make it difficult. Is it more of the crosswind? Is it more of the speed? If so, what speed? Where's your head at?
Well, honestly, when you say that, my first thought was, I like the Stanford play even more, because we know with Timmy Chang, Hawaii is going to be, they're all about, throwing the football around. They're more balanced than you would probably think a Timmy Chang team to be, but they definitely throw the ball quite a bit. You have to think with, Andrew Luck being at the helm of Stanford, they're looking to have a more balanced attack. So actually, I really had no opinion on the total when you said that. It made me like my Stanford play more, because I think if any team's going to be more impacted negatively by that wind, it's going to be Hawaii as opposed to Stanford.
The wind right now looks to be kind of a diagonal wind, which is maybe not as impactful as a true across the field wind. But even a diagonal wind, if it gets up in the 15 miles an hour consistently, if those gusts are 20, 25, that can affect things for sure. Because, Jared, you'll have to update me. Are we to Hawaii's new stadium yet, or are we still playing at the high school? I can't
think that the Hawaii stadium might actually be close to being done.
I was thinking it was done and that we were playing there, but I wasn't 100% sure. It's listed as at the athletics complex there on campus, but I'm like, I feel like that whole stadium was a disaster. And then things got thrown around with some of the volcano action there, and so that was just its own issue. And so I didn't know if we had for sure know where those guys are playing. No, I know there's been times.
Oh, no, they're still playing in the parking lot. The new stadium will not be completed until 2029. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So then I'll have to double check exactly where that one's coming from, and we'll have to get a reorientation or is it the parking lot? Is that still the parking lot on campus? I guess
Yeah,
that's the other thing you have to figure out
I'm
too.
pretty sure it's still on campus.
Okay, so if it's a parking lot on campus and we have the right direction and they're building the new
Yeah,
stadium somewhere else, that thing's been a mess. And I know
yeah,
every year it seems like we turn on to that first Hawaii game and it's like, what are the stands going to look like this year? Because it's just uh,
yeah.
it's its own fun thing. That'll do us for the picks portion of the show, but we've got some fun preseason ratings talk here. Cousin Jared, as you mentioned, you went through and ranked everybody 1 through 136. You did them into tiers. I'm gonna actually throw the first one at you here. First off, the model has Texas number 1, is very aligned with your top 4 as a tier. The only thing is that the model has maybe a little bit of a gap after 3, brings up maybe into a top 5, is a little bit higher on Alabama than you are and a little bit lower on Penn State than you are. And so those are kind of the 2 teams at the top. Obviously, Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, everyone thinks are going to be really, really good. You agree with that. Not really sure what else to say about those teams. But Alabama, model's a little high on. What do you think about that? Model's a little lower on Penn State. What do you think about that?
I'm surprised that sideline's a little bit low on Penn State. We know that sideline has an affinity for Penn State, always has, especially with the background knowledge of sideline thinks that Drew Aller, the quarterback for Penn State, is the best quarterback in college football.
I was going to say that's a talking point there, is it's got him number 1, which is the hot take, I know, because a lot of people are not going to agree with that.
Yeah. I mean,
around the country.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would disagree that he's a top 10 quarterback, but I think a lot of people would disagree.
I think a lot of people will disagree he's a top 10 quarterback. There's some.
Okay. Well, I disagree with that. I think he's a top 10 quarterback.
I would too. I think he's for sure top 10.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised he's number 1. So honestly, I cannot understand why it has Penn State where it does. Mine is more Alabama. I think the reason I might be a little bit lower than Alabama is I think it's just when you look at how they lost some of those games last year, it was just, man, it felt inconsistent. And I know we've talked about this a lot on the show, and it's just that Alabama almost not seems normal. That's not the right way to say it, but what happened to Alabama last year was the epitome of what never happened to Alabama with Nick Saban. Is they basically never lost a game that, they should have won. And you look at that Vanderbilt game last year, and, at the end of the game, Alabama had like a 98% win expectancy or something like that, but they had lost. And so,
but did Nick Saban ever have to play Diego Pavia, our boy, number 4 quarterback according to sideline, our boy right there, Diego Pavia?
No, he did not. Hugh Freeze did and lost, but no.
So yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Throwing that out there.
But no, Nick Saban never did. Honestly, I mean, I think Alabama is really good too. I had Alabama at number 6. So, I mean, I don't disagree with it. It's picking nits. I just think that Penn State has proven over the last couple seasons that they have just been a little bit more consistent and just a smidge higher in my mind than Alabama has been.
I think my take on it, Alabama is going to go as far as, their quarterback situation takes them, which is, I guess, Ty Simpson's the guy. I don't really know if that'll be the guy in 4 weeks. And Kalen DeBoer, who, was a great coach, of course, coming over from Washington, and only the 1 year now. I think it's just 1, right? What is time?
Yep.
I'm not saying it's a make or break year for him or anything. I'm just saying we're going to learn a lot here now in year 2, getting double our data on what he does in this part of the country, in this conference, with this recruiting ability. It's a different world, and where things go. Is he able to get that right again and win the games he's supposed to win, that sort of thing? And then what happens at quarterback, I think, is going to be the big question there. And that's going to be determined. Are they in that top tier, or are they like last year on that outside looking in, where it's like, yeah, they're clearly good, but they're just not in the same level as these top teams. I think with Penn State, what's interesting to me is a lot of people would be down on Penn State and say they can't win the big game. We talked about that a little bit in our season bet show and how the playoff was made for them, because if they can't win the big game, but they win the ones they should, they're going to make the playoff like every year.
Yep.
The model is a little bit down on their skill position guys. Obviously, they relied on one of the most incredible college football players ever last year who was their literal tight end, wide receiver, running back, quarterback. I think he probably punted and kicked some field goals too, because why wouldn't he? And losing that, Sidelin's got them outside, number 21 for the wide receiver tight end, number 20 at the running back spot. And that's really the big difference. They're, top 5 in offensive line, both run and pass block, top 5 pass defense, top 10 run defense, but it's those skill positions. And so the model's high on Aller, but a little bit more concerned about their skill position guys, which is interesting because we won't necessarily know a lot about which is which until the season goes along, but the model actually sees Aller's struggles last year as more of a maybe not getting as much help from those skill guys other than having the one really amazing player. And that's going to be, to me, where Penn State's going to make or break. Can they get over the hump ever is going to be the model's trusting Aller, but says it's a little bit unsure about those other guys. If those other guys can step up and match that production, the sky's the limit for a team like Penn State. While we're here, of course, Ohio State and Georgia and Texas, of course, we've got Arch Manning, number 3 quarterback, Julian Sayin for Ohio State, number 27, which seems perfectly reasonable for we don't really know a lot of what we're going to get from him. But that's going to be a heck of a matchup in week 1. We will obviously be covering Texas and Ohio State next week. I cannot believe they play so early.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's in the games of the week category.
I think you're right. About that one. The next tier is where things get interesting. 2 teams that the model has kind of right there on that outside looking in that you were a little bit lower on, Michigan and Florida, with LSU kind of trailing right behind them. The model's really high on Michigan. I wanted to get your take on that. Obviously, the quarterback situation there, massive question marks. Some of the offensive line, some question marks. We saw a very uninspiring Michigan team for most of the season last year, turn it on at the end with maybe the most impressive, cousin Jared, win of the season, that Ohio State win, given what we saw from Ohio State after that, and followed up with that bowl win. I mean, what an ending to that season. Completely changes your perspective on it. The model's really high on Michigan. You weren't quite as high. What do you think gives?
Yeah, so you mentioned 3 teams there, Michigan, Florida, LSU. I don't have much to say about LSU. Garrett Nussmeier, number 2 quarterback, according to Sideline. I won't argue with that. You have them number 8. I had them number 9. So sure, I'm perfectly fine with LSU being there. You have Florida 7. I have Florida 12. DJ Lagway, I think he's going to be good. You have him 8. I really can't quibble there. Michigan is definitely the one. You had him 6. I had him 15. We know that the potential at quarterback is certainly higher. The potential is higher and the floor is higher. They've got Mikey Keene there, who may or may not start the
but
first
at minimum
game
brings
of the
that
season.
Floor up to a level that probably
Yes.
Michigan quarterbacks have only had maybe 2 or 3 times in the last decade or 2 even. It's been a long time. I mean, there's only been a handful of seasons where you go, at least Keene will be better than a bunch of the other stuff they've had to deal with.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then on the other, the potential side of it, you've got Bryce Underwood. Definitely, I mean, Michigan fans would have loved to have, JJ McCarthy back last year, and Underwood's potential is even, echelon or 2 above what McCarthy was. So I definitely feel like almost the sky is the limit for Michigan at the quarterback position, but it's like, man, until I see it. And it's not even a matter of, because McCarthy was like perfectly serviceable quarterback. He was very good, but even with how efficient he was never asked to do much. And
they had 2 fairly good running backs and a pretty good offensive line, pretty good defense.
Yeah,
they had everything else.
Yeah, they that helps too. But it's kind of like, that's probably how it's going to play out if Mikey Keene is the quarterback. But if Underwood is the quarterback, are they going to turn him loose, or are they just going to kind of ask him to do, just be efficient, make solid throws, not necessarily really pushing to push the ball downfield or make plays with his legs? So for me, it's more of a schematic coaching philosophy, strategy type question, and not necessarily as much about the players on the field. Because if they decide to open up the offense and everything, and Underwood is for real, then yeah, for sure, like they are definitely, the 6th or maybe even top 5 team in the country. Yeah. But if they kind of keep the governor on the offense and not letting it get up to full speed, I feel like, 10 is about where they should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point there. The model's not concerned about the running back situation, is a little concerned about the offensive line. Number 31 pass blocking, number 29 run blocking. And I don't have it in front of me, but the year that Michigan won the national championship, and even probably a couple of years before that, I have to assume their offensive lines were top five, probably every
Yeah.
year in and year out. And so that's going to be the biggest thing is if their offensive line, they got a couple of young guys in there. If that offensive line comes together and they get anything out of the quarterback position, they're instantly going to be vaulted to that top tier. And they're going to be right in the middle of all that other nonsense with Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State, Alabama, right? Whatever. If they don't get great quarterback play, the offensive line as a gel, they're going to be more in that 15 range, maybe even lower than that. This is a team that's got a lot of volatility, I think, coming into the season. And so a lot of hot takes. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be really high on Michigan because the possibility of them having a quarterback, like you said, even better than McCarthy, or even as good as McCarthy, who is the best quarterback they've had in a long time, right, gives you a lot of hope because we know the defense is going to be stout again. But I'm like you, until we see it, I'm not really sold yet. Again, all models are wrong. I'm not saying this is right where the model has them, but the model says there's enough pieces at quarterback to get enough decent play that if they're getting better play there, and honestly, I compare it to Oregon, we'll talk about here in just a second, where Dante Moore has enough data that we're just not quite as sold on Dante Moore. And that's kind of the difference right now in the model looking at Oregon and Michigan, whereas you might have flipped those two teams. The model says, hey, I think Mikey Keene and whatever the heck we're doing at quarterback is better than Dante Moore, number 81 starting quarterback, according to Sideline for Oregon, which is part of the reason why the model has them 17. You had them 7th. You had them in that second tier. And the model says, whoa, buddy, besides Dante Moore, because I know you're not high on him, what is the other thing that you think that Oregon can overcome that? Or do you think they can just ask him not to do much and protect that, whereas the model thinks that Dante Moore is going to be a real drag?
Yeah, I just have faith in Dan Lanning. Basically, everything he does, I have faith in. It's 1000% this can backfire, but we also know that Dan Lanning will always make the optimal decision in whatever the scenario is. And so on individual games that can cause these crazy outcomes because, he gets, turned the ball over on 4th down 2 times, completely changes, the complexion of a game. I'm thinking of the game against Washington maybe 2 years ago. But on the whole, you have to like a coach who's doing that, who's, making every call, making every decision with,
maximizing the expected value. That's what we try to do here is maximize expected value.
Yes, exactly. So I definitely appreciate that. I feel decent about Oregon's defense. Their offense, they definitely have some weapons to replace, but we know that Oregon's always going to have offensive weapons. It really, to me, just comes down to the quarterback play and what Dante Moore can do. I feel like two teams that are, in my opinion, almost mirror images of each other. And Sideline sees that as well. Oregon, you mentioned them. Sideline has them at number 17. And then Tennessee, Sideline has them at number 18. And I mean, if there are two teams that are, their success is correlated to how well their quarterbacks play, I don't know two better teams than these two, because both Oregon and Tennessee have almost everything that you want, except they're really good.
Joey Aguilar ranked 120 out of 136, folks. These are the only two teams that have quarterbacks that are below average if you go down the rankings until you get down to Rutgers at 36, who has a barely below average quarterback, but they don't rely on the quarterback. Then Kentucky at 41, barely below average quarterback. They also don't rely on the quarterback. Minnesota at 44, below average, don't rely on. I mean, you're talking about, it doesn't get down until the 50s where you get to a teams with below average quarterbacks. I mean, you have to have a good quarterback in college football, except these two teams are hanging in the top 20, even though the model does not like what they have going.
Yeah. And the thing that you can say with Dante Moore is that, relatively speaking, it's still a small sample size with him. He played a little bit at UCLA, didn't play almost at all at Oregon last year. Aguilar's played for a couple seasons at App State. There is lots of tape on him. There's lots of data on him. And so I think in my own rankings, I had Oregon 7. I think that they will find a way to get more up to par. The people around him can do more. It's like, I don't know what more Joey Aguilar can do. And I'm sure if, everybody's friend Jake was here, he would say that, why are you saying that you trust everything that Dan Lanning does? What has Josh Heupel done to make you think that he will not have a good offense? And I can't argue with that. All I can say is that is my personal opinion.
Mm.
I just feel like Joey Aguilar is not is going to be a step down for Tennessee, is what I would say.
And the model agrees with that too. That it's got more Dante Moore much closer to average, whereas Aguilar lower. Of note, the model has Tennessee number 6 pass defense, number 6 rush defense, so stout defense, number 5 running back room. Issue is lacking at the skill position on the outside at wide receiver, a little bit more of a questionable line. Bad quarterback play, questionable line play. That's going to make those top tier games for Tennessee tougher. They should do great in the other games, so their defense should carry them against the mid tier teams, which is, I think, one of the reasons why Jake liked their season. One of the reasons he liked their season win over, because that defense, of course, is so strong. And with a good running game, if they can, kill some clock that way, control the ball, good defense, they're going to win some games. It's just the quarterback play is going to likely prevent them from competing, we think, with the upper part of the SEC. Of note with Oregon, model trust their offense, replacing all those guys, top 10 offensive line play, a little bit less so on the defense. But that, of course, is a big question, like you said, with what are they going to ask these quarterbacks to do? And we have a good idea, and that's where the model gets better as we go along, but everyone else's do, because everyone else will learn the same things that we do. If Oregon needs Dante Moore to do more, then it's going to make the model look a little smarter with being hesitant with Oregon. If they can figure out a way to not have him do as much, then Cousin Jared, you're probably going to look a little bit smarter having them higher up, and the model will figure that out and adjust as we go along.
Yep.
One other real big surprise while we're here, Notre Dame. Model has them number 20. You had them at number 8. A lot of new faces there. A new quarterback, CJ Carr, who number 33 according to sidelines, so we're plopping him in right at pretty reasonable. But the model is maybe not quite as sold on all the other things that Notre Dame has to fill. What was your take on that?
I think that, so number one, I just have faith in Notre Dame's defense because of Marcus Freeman. He was a defensive coordinator. I think he's just going to have that defense ready to play. They have a baseline of talent at Notre Dame that, like, you're not going to fall below that threshold. Not worried about the defense at all. I think this Notre Dame running game is just probably head and shoulders the best running game in the country. They are called offensive line U for a reason. They just absolutely reload along the offensive line every year. I mean, you could go down the list of all the first and second round draft picks that Notre Dame's had along the offensive line. I don't think that's going to change. And so in my mind, when you compare it to Oregon and Tennessee, there's like this baseline level of what the quarterback's going to have to do for those offenses. It may be low, but it's not nothing. Notre Dame, there is even more leeway for quarterback play there because of how strong the running game is and how strong the defense is. So I just think if CJ Carr is average, this Notre Dame team will be maybe not as good, but similar to the team from last year. And we saw how well they could play. So for me, this is probably just more, I think I love everything about Notre Dame, except maybe the quarterback play, but that can end up being fine. So I just really like what Marcus Freeman has going on there.
Model is not sold on their offensive line yet, based off of, like you said, all the guys that they've lost. And so that could be one, though, that quickly changes, where if they have that dominant offensive play like we expect them kind of to, that offensive line ratings going to go up in a hurry, and that's going to really help them. Obviously, Notre Dame, as always, plays one of the toughest schedules in the season. In the back half, it gets easier for them as they get 5 straight ACC games against weaker opponents. But in their first, 6 games here, their weakest opponents are Purdue and Boise State. That's insane.
Yeah.
I don't think there's another team in the country whose first 6 games, their weakest opponents would be Purdue and Boise State.
Yeah, and you know what? Good for them for scheduling Boise State.
Yeah, oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. Like you said, CJ Carr, the big question mark as the true freshman coming in. Jeremiah Love, the running back who will be their everything back. The question is, what kind of depth is he going to get behind him and that production? And that's one where last year, Jadarian Price, looked great about that, looked great in that role. Can they continue to do it again? How much of that was the offensive line? And, that was so good with regards to now they've lost a couple of those guys, but can they replace, and that's where, again, the model has a couple of questions specifically at a couple of the spots that they got new guys in. We just don't have enough data to know, but they've also got a couple of 4-star true freshmen that may jump right in there and turn out to be impact guys. And then they become the great rated guy. So there's just a couple things there that could switch around. Michigan's kind of in that same boat as well, but we're not expecting the Michigan line to necessarily be at that pro level. And so we have a couple of question marks as to who's going to play where, but we kind of think it'll be decent. Whereas Notre Dame, we got a couple of question marks. We think it'll be decent, but they're going to need it to be excellent because you think it will. And I don't think that's a crazy take. The model just kind of wants to see it a little bit first because especially with their schedule, if they can't figure it out early, their first game, we'll cover it. It'll be one of the games of the week at Miami.
Yeah.
Then they get a bye week to recover, but then it doesn't get any easier. As we said, they'll play A&M in week 3. Then they'll have to travel to Arkansas in week 5. And so they've got some really tough ones here right off the bat. Another team that the model a little bit lower on than you were, Clemson. We've got them at number 11. You had them at number 5. You've got Clemson as the team maybe most likely to make that leap in at the top 4, whereas the model a little bit more hesitate. Cade Klubnik, number 13. I was surprised at how well if you just look at last year's stats, nothing else. And now we look at more than this for the rating. We don't just look at the previous year. We look at a variety of factors. Usually just last year, though, he grades out as one of the top 5 quarterbacks in college football, according to Sideline. Really rough before that. And obviously not maybe highly regarded as a prospect as some of the other guys that we might talk about here. But if he can build off of that, Clemson having a quarterback has been when they've been dominant.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe Klubnik can finally be that guy after years of we said he wouldn't be that guy because of how much he struggled? Kind of turned into that guy last year, maybe turning into that guy now?
Yeah, and it's just also I feel like the way that he came in, I feel like they clearly wanted him to sit a year behind DJ, and then that didn't work out because DJ wasn't great. He kind of got
and he wasn't ready for it.
And he wasn't ready for it. And to almost literally the exact point of what you just said, oh, hey, Clemson's just a quarterback away. And that's a lot of pressure to have on Klubnik. And I feel like he's just finally kind of grown into that role. You've got some of these 4 and 5-star guys that come in and they can just do it right away. Klubnik was a guy who I think just needed a few seasons. And now I think Sideline has him as the 13th best quarterback. I think I would say top 10. Probably for me, I think I'd probably have him closer to 7 or 8. And I think that's definitely good enough for this Clemson team with the defense they have and the conference they play in. I think, definitely good enough for them to be really good to us against the spread this season.
And you mentioned too, just to be fair, the gap on some of these quarterbacks is really small. So the difference between 4 or 5 spots is not a lot in the model. We're talking about one game could easily swing that. So, obviously some of these, especially for now, Klubnik will probably hold a little bit more steady. We have some data on him, but especially all these younger guys who've only played in mop-up duty or haven't even played at all in some cases will move around a lot as the early season data happens. One last team here to mention, we're in the ACC while we're here. Miami, model not high on them as well. Number 25, you have them at 10. And this is where we have to talk about Carson Beck, who Sideline has at number 49, which feels like a hot take. I don't know many other places. Maybe there's other people out there who would rank every quarterback out there and would have him in that range. And again, there's no real statistical difference between 40 and 49 and 60, but to say he's even potentially the 40th best college quarterback sounds insane given where he was coming into last year. How much of that last year was, just didn't have maybe the same weapon, talk about having a tight end like, Haller had last year, having a tight end who was all God, and Bowers maybe earlier on in his career, now not having him. How much of it was the injury? How much of it was a bad year? What do you make of the fact that we were so high on him coming into last year, and now this year it's like, you don't trust this guy at all?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is, go join us over on Patreon. One of the articles I wrote kind of had just a couple of brief thoughts on this game. And last season in SEC conference games, Carson Beck had a 63.6% completion percentage, threw for about 7.5 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions in those conference games that he played in last season. So to your point, very good a couple of years ago, completely pedestrian, if not slightly below average last year against that top level competition. You mentioned it before we started recording that, I believe he had Tommy John surgery in the off season.
I knew it was something with his arm. I didn't know which one it was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Tommy John surgery. So it's like we watch enough baseball and know enough about baseball. there are signs that things are going poorly for a pitcher before, and then you get that, he's got a sore elbow, and then all
I
of a
mean,
sudden,
nowadays it's like nowadays it's so incredible to me. This isn't a baseball show, but I swear I've seen it where a guy goes out there in the third inning, he throws two pitches that are under his velo, and everything looks
mm,
fine, and they're out there and they pull him, and they
yep,
know. And it's
yep,
like, how did you know off of two pitches? No signs
yes,
of anything. He didn't say a word, and they knew. They had the
and
data to know. It's
yes,
crazy.
and clearly, like, the injury definitely happened in the SEC championship game. But I'm just wondering if maybe he had been less than 100% for a
Mm-hmm.
while. So I think that a couple things. Number one, I'm wondering if the surgery is going to help him. Also think slash no, playing not in the SEC will also help him. And so when I see that he's the 49th ranked quarterback, I think he's probably closer to top 25 than he is, number 49 there. And so I think that's why I'm a little bit higher on Miami as a whole. I'm projecting that Beck is going to be that top 25, top 20 quarterback. And I just don't think sideline, it's saying, hey, he was bad, and I've got to see it before I believe it. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, because even taking Beck out of it, Miami's defense was so terrible last year that I let's put it this way. I saw Miami at number 25 and saw Carson Beck at number 49, and I was like, okay, like I understand. I may not agree, but I completely understand.
There are a couple things to mention here with Beck, and I think what I want to say to you, viewer, is to get a little bit, just a tiny bit into the nuts and bolts of what the model's doing, is it is adjusting for the level of competition. So it is giving him a pass to some extent for the SEC play, but it can only give so much of a pass. It is also weighting last year's data a lot heavier than the previous season. Why is that? Because these are college kids, and I cannot tell it, hey, for this guy do this and for this guy do that, because that's not how models work, right? And the bottom line is, if we weren't weighting the last season heavier, then you would see maybe a guy like Klubnik, or there are 100 other examples that when they make a leap, the leap should be more believed in that 1 year because of the fact that these kids are all 18, 19, 20. This isn't professional athletes where you might want to be a little bit more hesitant on that and look more at the 2 years ago data, because he's 27. And so, yeah, he could have made a leap at 26, but also 25, 26, 27, you're right in your prime. But here, in general, we want to have considered the previous season more than the one before that. So if I were to weight the previous season heavier, Beck would be a lot higher, of course, and we can manually do that in our heads. The model doesn't have the ability to do that. And so when you combine the fact that it is considering that really tough opposition last year, but it's also saying, I can't ignore that data, it's really low on him. I don't know where he'll land, but you're right. If he plays better, then that's going to make Miami a better team. And so the discrepancy there, I think, is solely explained by Carson Beck. I think if I were to plug in, like you say, a number 25th best quarterback, Miami probably jumps up about 10 spots. If I were to plug in a top 10 quarterback, all of a sudden Miami's probably now, number 8 or something like that. And they might be number 8. Their defense might actually be worse than the model thinks this year too. We don't really know. There's a lot of question marks, of course, with Miami. But it's interesting. And the last thing I want to mention here before we move on to a couple other teams, the ACC, because we talked about Clemson, we talked about Miami. The top of these rankings are so SEC and Big Ten dominant. That's the way every ranking system is at this point. They have the bigger schools, the most talent. They've literally gone out and gotten those schools for this reason. It does make it interesting to figure out where to slot these other teams in, because most of them are at that tier below. And so it's interesting to me when you look at these non-conference games, when these teams play for conferences, then we'll kind of ignore it and then we'll come right back to it for the playoff and bowl season. Yes, right now, the model's got Clemson better than Miami. You think Clemson better than Miami. A number of other examples in the Big 12, as well. But the real question is, where are they relative to everybody else? Are they closer? Are they further apart? And that's where we don't really know at this point. And it's harder to know that because it's so top heavy from those two conferences. But like you said, playing most of the teams they do, those guys will get to pad their stats, look better relative to their competition. And then those games they play each other should be a lot of fun. Because you got a couple other things here up at the top that were some discrepancies here. Ole Miss and A&M model really high on them, has them at number 9-10. You had them at 18-19. Another SEC team right there, Oklahoma. Sideline has them at 13. You had them at 20. So the model's a little bit higher on this mid tier of the SEC than you are. Again, hard to know exactly where these teams slot.
Yeah.
You think when all is said and done here, these teams are going to have losses and they're going to fall below the rankings. And one of these teams is going to be 6-6. And the model's still going to say they're the 20th best team because they have 6 losses to teams ahead of them. So it's kind of picking nits here. But why do you think that maybe these teams should be below some of these other Big 10, maybe some of these Big 12 teams where the model is elevating them? What do you see here? Ole Miss, A&M, and Oklahoma.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the easy one is like Clemson, like quarterback play. Like I trust Cade Klubnik more than I trust Marcel Reed, more than I trust John Mateer. But of those 3 teams that you mentioned, the one that I think probably has the most upside of all of them is Ole Miss, because I'll be honest with you, don't know much about Austin Simmons, but if there's anybody who I trust to get really good quarterback play, our boy Lane Kiffin. So, and Lane Kiffin loves a good cover. He loves a good over.
So we love him for that too.
Yes, exactly. So Ole Miss is, of those teams, I just feel like there is it's a high ceiling, but I just feel like there is a cap on Oklahoma and Texas A&M, whereas Ole Miss, they've been on top of the transfer game since before it was kind of the cool thing to do. Kiffin always finds a way to get really good quarterback play. I feel like that's the one where if they put everything together, I have them at 18, but I could definitely see them being closer to, where you have them at number 9 there. I think with A&M and Oklahoma, there's just, I think they just have a few more limitations that Ole Miss just doesn't have.
Yeah, and of course, I think the most important thing to note for Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, we talked about this earlier, they do not have to play Vanderbilt this year. So
Diego Pavia,
no Diego Pavia, which is going to matter for them. Yeah, Austin Simmons is of course the big question mark. He did play mop-up duty plenty last year, so we have a good feeling that he will be solid. Southern has him as number 43. I think that's a completely reasonable take as a 4-star quarterback with some time in there already. The question is going to be, like you said, what can Lane Kiffin get out of him? And if that creeps up, then Ole Miss has a chance to really be dangerous. Even if not, they'll still probably find ways because that's what he's, of course, done. Indiana was so good to us last year, bringing in Fernando Mendoza now to take over at quarterback. Because I think we're similarly aligned on this one. Southern's got them 12, you had them 16. I think the real question is, can they compete again in the Big Ten? They don't have the softest schedule in the world like they had last year. We expect Michigan to take a step forward. So between the Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and of course Oregon still around, can Indiana hang in that top 4 and make it a top 5, or was that a one-year wonder last year?
I think if Fernando Mendoza is truly a top 25 quarterback, which Sideline thinks is close to that.
Number 29 right now.
Yeah, then sure, I think Indiana can, well, that's the other problem. Indiana can play similarly to the way they did last year, but because of that schedule, they may end up with a few more losses. I think Indiana can be good again this year if Mendoza plays that well. This is one where I'm hoping that Sideline does a better job of isolating and identifying what outcomes the quarterback is responsible for versus like what his, surrounding cast of characters are responsible for. Because anytime you watched a Cal game, you were going to see some stuff that was a little subpar, especially offensively. Sideline is definitely on the side of, that's a lot of his supporting cast that, was the result of some of those challenges that they had on offense at Cal. My eyes not sharp enough to immediately identify those type of things. So I wouldn't have thought that Mendoza was that good, but clearly Sideline thinks that, he is. So if he can live up to that rating that Sideline has, I think Indiana can play similarly to the way they did last year. They still may have a few more losses though.
I was a little surprised. I didn't realize that Mendoza got to 3,000 passing yards last year. 16 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. I think the other thing too is in my head, it was worse than that. And you look at some of his numbers, and it maybe wasn't as bad as I thought, with regards to some of that play. Again, early on in the season, like I say, having number 29 now, a couple bad games here and there. And of course, early on, they don't really play anybody. But you get to their first 2 conference games are Illinois and Iowa. And those are going to be two tests because, Illinois is supposed to be pretty solid this year. Home game against them at Iowa is always tough, even though Iowa, we think will take a little bit of a step back this year. But those are going to be 2 games that if they're going to really establish themselves as one of the top teams in this conference, they got to win those games. And they didn't have quite so many tough games like that last year that were losable games. We'll say that they'll be favored in. They'll be favored by, 3-7. They didn't have a lot of those last year. They had a lot of games where they were favored by like 14, or they were favored by 7 and the model said 14. And we said, yeah, let's lay the 7, and they ended up winning by 28 or something.
Yeah.
And they're going to have a few less of those here this year. Of course, they play Penn State, which is on the road, which is going to be really tough. At Oregon, it's going to be really tough. And then on top of the Illinois, Iowa games, they get Wisconsin's. Not necessarily the toughest schedule because they do get to avoid a couple of those top teams, but a little bit of a tougher one than they had last year. Last year, I don't know how they could have had a softer schedule than they did. One other thing to talk about here, the Big 12. We haven't mentioned it all. Headline, not that high on both Arizona State and Kansas State, because you've got them top 15. Sideline has them paired right together, right outside of the top 30. Quite an interesting take there. I think we're both fairly high on Utah. The model's a little higher on Tech than you were. So a little higher on Tech, a little bit lower on Arizona State, Kansas State. What are your Big 12 thoughts?
So mostly with Kansas State is like, when in the past decade has Kansas State not been between number 10 and number 20? Like best team in the country. I feel like that's just solidly where they should lie until
it feels
proven otherwise.
They were who we thought they were.
Yes,
but every year.
Yes, absolutely every year.
Someone can comment. There was one year where that wasn't true, I'm sure. You can comment that one year, but we're talking like most of the time.
Yeah, and I mean, I even mentioned that in my article that I posted is I put them 11 because that was kind of where that third tier started for me. And it's like, if I look at all of these teams, basically, who do I feel like is going to be most consistent or do I trust the most? It's Kansas State. And so that's why I put them there at 11. So for me, that's just, like Kansas State seemingly has always been the whole is greater than the sum of the parts kind of thing. And so I think that's what you're going to see from Kansas State as we normally do. Texas Tech, if Morton can stay healthy at the quarterback position, maybe you could convince me that's the case. What they've done in the transfer portal, it's been really good. But when was the last time Texas Tech had a quarterback that made it through the entire season without missing substantial amounts of time? They just can't keep, anybody healthy. And in this time of, transfers, it's hard to keep a good backup quarterback around. So I'm not blaming Tech for that. That's just kind of the nature of how it is. For me, I feel like the team, and I mean, I noted this as well, but you have Utah, or Sideline has Utah at number 22. Like Utah is the Big 12 team that I'm like, okay, if somebody is going to really jump out and separate themselves from, the entire top half of the Big 12, I think it's Utah. They're going to have a good defense. They got Devin Dampier now running quarterback, a team that wants to run the ball. Seems like a match made in heaven. So I feel like if I had to pick one team to kind of jump above the rest, I would probably go with Utah.
A couple of follow-up notes there. The backup for Tech actually grades out fairly well. Will Hammond, a 4-star redshirt freshman, played in 4 games last year, of course, still being able to redshirt. And so at least they have that as a possibility in case Morton gets hurt. We've got Morton at 19, and then we've got Avery Johnson for Kansas State at 15. Sam Levitt at number 11, I think is interesting with Arizona State because I'm hearing a lot of chatter about them taking a step and being even better than they were before. And it's not so much that I would disagree with that as much as it is the model's already got Sam Levitt at number 11. And he's the one I would expect to make the jump this year as they transition into maybe less of a run-heavy offense. The model already says he's really good, so I don't really know where their ceiling is in that I think they'll be really good. I'm not sure they can necessarily jump up. I'm like you. I think Utah's got a chance to do it. Devin Dampier only number 42, but a guy I've long talked about from a couple years ago, even watching him when he first started playing, really liking what he could do. And if he takes some steps and proves that he can play at this level of competition, the jump from UNM is quite a jump to talent level at Utah. The elevation's about the same. at least relatively speaking, but the talent level
Yeah.
that he's going to play is very different. If he can become that top 20 quarterback that the model thinks these other schools we've been talking about have, they've definitely got a chance. And we've seen Kyle Whittingham, of course, do some incredible things when they get the offense going. Kansas State, I think, is interesting. Fun little math for us here. This is Simpson's paradox in action. Kansas State has no position units ranked below the 30s. Quarterback, Avery Johnson, number 15. Wide receiver, tight end, number 23. Offensive pass block, number 27. Running back, number 17. Offensive run block, number 19. Pass defense, number 29. Run defense, number 26. And yet they find themselves outside of the top 30. And that's because the other teams have some other things that are lower, but they've got things that are better. And that's what we talk about Kansas State. They're just a very solid average team. And Kissinger, for them to beat their sideline projection, they're going to have to continue to do what you said, which is the sum of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. And they excel at that there. They have a coach who excels at that. So I have no doubt that they will be able to do that. The model is at this point just saying, I haven't seen it yet. I got to see it. But that is absolutely very much on the table, obviously, for Kansas State and obviously Arizona State, who did it last year, has a great young coach. Obviously for Utah and Tech, both having good coaches, all of these teams can absolutely do it. Unfortunately for me, my Baylor Bears, number 35, I'm less sold that they'll be better than that. I think if they're the 35th best team at the end of the year, I would say that's probably okay. I don't think that's crazy. I'd be probably content with that because I think the downside's a little bit lower. And I'm not sure how high the upside is for them, unfortunately. The Big 12 is going to be a lot of fun, folks. It's going to be a lot of crazy games.
You were saying that if you go further down there, 50, 51, 52, 53, 50, what do they have? 56, 60, all other Big 12 teams. So, I mean, the bottom of the Big 12 is pretty solid, but man, they are all right there together.
BYU right there. BYU right there with Baylor in the mid 30s, TCU at number 28. It's going to be, all these teams so close. It's going to be a fun conference. Was there anything else that I neglected to mention on the teams that you wanted to run through? Quarterback talk, anything else that I missed?
No, there was not. And I know I said I wanted to talk about the bottom 10 teams, but really I just want to talk about team number 136. That is the number one thing I want to talk about. So who does Sideline say is the worst team in college football, and why is it Kent State?
It's somehow Kent State has been beaten out by Akron, according to Sideline. And we talked about this all day. And I mentioned this on Discord. There are 3 teams at the bottom now. Kennesaw State is being drugged down there. And they're interesting because they're projected to play slower than molasses, which is good for them because teams that are good should play slower. It's just like in college basketball. Teams that aren't good should slow down, play possession, shoot the 3, right? And so Kennesaw State's an interesting team where I'm not sure if they're going to be in that bottom tier or if they're going to play slow enough to look not bad and be out of that. But the model really identified Kent State as way below average and also Akron. And so we know Kent State will be bad, but apparently the model thinks Akron will be just as bad. I was surprised. I was thinking that we were a little bit more optimistic on Akron, but the model apparently is not having any part of Ben Finley and the Akron offense. I'm not really sure why, but doesn't like Akron or Kent State.
Yeah. And, at least to your point with Kennesaw State, you have them 134. I had them 135. So I mean, like I'm there with you. The only thing I can say, I guess 2 things when I look at this: one about Akron and one about Kent State. Ben Finley, I feel like, has failed in multiple places now. And sorry, that was strong. Ben Finley has not found success at a few different stops at this point.
Well, as we like to say here, Ben Finley, number 126 starting quarterback. If I put other backups in there, I might have him as the 200th best quarterback in college football. I'd love to be the 200th best anything in my life, in the world, in the country, whatever. And so it's just, unfortunately, for him, he keeps trying some of these other places, these FCS places, and maybe or FBS places. Maybe he'd have success at the FCS level, which is nothing to be ashamed of because he's very, very talented at quarterback. But he's trying to play in a very tough situation, and he hasn't succeeded yet. Which is not a fault on him. It's just he's playing some really, really incredible players.
Yeah, and so maybe I need to say, hey, Sideline sees something here, that there is a cap on how well this offense can play with Ben Finley. He's struggled other places. Maybe that's it. On the Kent State side, God, they're just so bad. But if you go back and look, and I don't even know if I could find the article that I wrote at this point. But where Kent State ended up ranking in Bill Connolly, here we go. Bill Connolly ranked 764 college football teams. And Kent State would have been the 14th best team in Division II, not even FCS. They would have been the 14th best team in Division II football.
That's bad.
That is so bad that I'm not sure that's repeatable. You know,
Yeah, I don't either.
Like I just, on the range of outcomes, I don't think that's anywhere near. I just don't know if it'd be repeated. So that's really the only thing I can say about Kent State is that it was just a tail end outcome last year.
And the model saw the same thing last year, for the record. If you are with us last year or see or remember some of this, up last year's ratings here, a full Kennesaw State was very bad. And Kennesaw State ended up, I believe last year was the year they lost like half their team in the middle of the season, if I believe correctly, transferred out. And so the wheels fell off. So if we were, and that was their first year in FCS, or FBS, if we removed Kennesaw State, last year, Kent State, the model had them 9 points worse than the next worst team. That is insane. I don't think I've ever seen that in college sports.
No,
you just can't, in any sport.
I mean, that's Mississippi
crazy.
Valley State basketball territory.
That's worse than that. I mean, Mississippi Valley State usually wasn't even that 9 points back. And so that's how terrible it was. So it is interesting that the model this year is like, yeah, but here's why it'll get better. And I'm like, will it? I don't know. I think a lot has to do with, who you lost, who you brought back. Did you want to bring back guys, that sort of thing? Of note, both Kent State and Akron project to have absolutely terrible defenses. Kent State worse than Akron, but they would be the 136th ranked defense. Yes, Kent State would be 136. Fortunately for Akron, the reason Kent State maybe slightly better than Akron according to sideline, I can't believe I'm saying that, gives them a little bit more hope on offense, partially because it believes a little bit more in their wide receivers, thinking that that of all of these, that might be a little bit of a saving grace for Kent State in being completely terrible, like they're going to be on offensive line, where they're going to be absolutely dreadful, and they're going to be on defense where they're absolutely dreadful. Also, CJ Montez, I don't know if it's almost this lack of data that we have, and maybe you can be competent or whatever, but there's also questions. The problem is these MAC schools, there's questions on who's going to be quarterback week to week sometimes. There's questions on, who's going to be quarterback even to start the season everywhere. But the problem is the everywheres, we have a little bit more of an idea of some of these 5-star guys. We have more game tape on them. They played mop-up duty last year. Some of these smaller schools, it gets really difficult. And so, if in a few weeks we've got the same thing happening again, I wouldn't be surprised. Folks, what I would say is that just because the model is Kent State only at 135, let's not bet on them. Just for the first, let's just give it a little bit to see, are they really actually even in this same league, or are they like last year where they didn't belong in the league?
Yes. With that being said, though, I can't imagine this happening, but if Sideline says to fade Kent State, I'm going to be all over it.
Yes.
Going to be all over it.
I agree. I think 135 that the model has them at feels like their ceiling.
Yeah.
CJ Montez, just to call up real quick, did play in 3 games last year. 300 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, and had a rushing touchdown while he played backup for New Mexico. So the model at least sees that as more competent than what Ben Finley brought to Akron. Unfortunately for Kennesaw State, the other team in this bottom, their quarterback grades out at number 130, and that is part of the reason that they are in this bottom trio of teams. So again, Sideline right now says it's a trio of teams at the bottom that are separated away. You and I know a lot of other people say it's just Kent State. Maybe there's hope for Kent State. Maybe they can not be quite so bad this year. It is interesting the things that the model says, I need to see it first, and the things that the model has faith on. This is not to say, again, it's a perfect model, not to say it knows exactly. It is just to make you think. Are these things you should be questioning? Are these things you should be assuming? And there are certain times that the model assumes things that maybe we should assume a little bit more of. There's times where the model assumes things we shouldn't, and vice versa. And these are the questions that we like to ask about the model, because again, we use it as a guiding point, not necessarily as gospel, because again, as I've said before, all models are wrong, and some models are useful. Cousin Jared, I think that sounds like that's all we've got for the show. Parting words before we sign off.
Let's just enjoy college football. It feels fitting every year this time. Miss Cousin Jared's grandfather is turning 93 next week. He was a high school football coach in Texas for 40 years. He will tell you that he coached with Bum Phillips's dad And, I should really know that because that was the coach of the Oilers in the 80s. So I should really know the coach's name off the top of my head, but I don't. He coached with Hayden Fry, who coached, a few seasons at colleges in Texas before going up to Iowa. And a member of his staff was Bill Snyder. And so, anyway, my wife's grandfather, big football guy. And basically the first weekend of every college football season, we're with him for his birthday. And so anyway, it just feels right spending his 93rd birthday probably watching Kansas State and Iowa State with
There you
him.
go. There you go. I think you mean Bum Phillips, actually, would have been the
Oh,
the
Bum
one.
Phillips.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because sorry, I was thinking Wade. Yeah, it's Bum
Yeah.
Phillips. He coached with Bum Phillips, was friends with Wade Phillips. Yeah, so he goes way back. 93. He's seen a lot. He won the 1950s. I'm going to go with 1956 Gator Bowl with Texas Tech. Yeah, he was a offensive guard at 190 pounds. So if that tells you
Times have changed.
times have changed. That is
Absolutely.
correct.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, we've got 4 good ones here for week 0 because I'm like you. I'm more excited for this week 0 slate than I've been for many of them here in the last several years we've been doing the show. We're recording this here on Thursday night, so not a lot of turnaround here before week 0, but we'll be right back at it after these games. We will be recording every week on Sunday night, and so we'll be recording here just in a few days for week 1. Again, we've already kind of teased a couple of the matchups. There's some really good ones. No rating talk then, just straight games, nothing but. We'll try to squeeze as many games into our allotted time as we can. Again, you can get more over on Patreon. We got baseball stuff rolling over there, college football stuff. Cousin Jared, your college football articles have been fun to read, and you'll have more of those throughout the season, more picks, more information, more data. Of course, a lot of fun over the Discord. Other people giving out picks on all the sports we don't have a model for. A lot of great things happening. That link in the show description. If you haven't watched it yet, check out that season bets episode. There's still time to get those in. Only one of them is impacted for this weekend. So there's still plenty of time to watch that before those bets get taken off the board. Thanks for being back with us. We're so excited to be back. We're so excited for this college football season. And we want to remind you, as always, here that with the right mindset and right model, while you will lose a lot of bets, folks, you will win more when you win than you'll lose when you lose.